Good evening. Welcome to Southern California Edison's community Livestream meeting for the Santa Paula, Fillmore, and surrounding unincorporated communities. My name is Rhonda Guthrie, and I am a Principal Manager of Government Relations for Southern California Edison. I know or have met many of you at past meetings, and I greatly appreciate that you took the time to participate this evening. Please know if you get disconnected or if you have to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on sce.com/wildfire. We would also like to acknowledge our elected officials and their staff who have joined us this evening, including Supervisor Kelly Long, Fillmore Council members Mark Austin, Lynn Edmonds, and Manny Minjares, and Santa Paula City Manager Dan Singer. We appreciate you always having open lines of communication, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership. Let me start by saying we recognize what a stressful time this is and how important it is for you and your families to have electricity while we've been asked to stay at home. We are focused on safely providing reliable service to our customers, and we're continuing to work 24/7 to serve our communities. Our number one concern remains public safety. As California prepares for the upcoming wildfire season, we want to provide you with the latest information on how we're preparing and what you can do to prepare. Since we last presented to your communities on our wildfire mitigation plan and public safety power shutoff, or PSPS for short, we have made significant progress on hardening our grid from wildfires, and we also heard the valuable feedback you provided regarding the impacts of PSPS on your communities. We have several new and improved customer service programs and resources to tell you about this evening. This is one of many community-specific meetings in a series of community Livestream meetings that we are doing to educate our customers, communities, and stakeholders on our wildfire safety efforts. While this meeting is open to anyone, we will be sharing information that's specific to the Santa Paula, Fillmore, and surrounding unincorporated communities. Please know that we will be scheduling in-person City Council presentations as soon as it is safe to do so. Next slide, please. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us, and we encourage you to submit questions. Because we have a large number of attendees, we will be taking questions through the Skype Q&A window. You should be able to see the chat box on your right-hand side. If there is a similar question already being asked that you would like answered, you can click on the heart icon next to the question to like it. We will address the questions that receive the most likes first and go down from there. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and the material being presented. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Next slide, please. Here are tonight's presenters. I will cover a few more topics before handing it over to Eric Takeisu, Vice President of Transmission, Substations, and Operations, to discuss our wildfire mitigation efforts. You will then hear from Mike Morelli, Vice President of our Business Customer Division, who will update you on new and improved customer care programs and our engagement. Next slide, please. For tonight's agenda, we will cover wildfire preparedness tips, provide an overview of SCE's response to COVID-19, review 2019 lessons learned from last year's wildfire season and what's new for 2020, discuss SCE's wildfire mitigation plan and PSPS specific to the Santa Paula, Fillmore, and surrounding unincorporated areas, provide information on our customer care programs, and highlight our community engagement efforts for the coming months. We will also provide additional safety resources and then open it up for Q&A. Next slide, please. I know your towns are very familiar with wildfire preparedness, but I wanted to take a moment to remind us all of a few safety tips. The graphic on this slide is from CAL FIRE's Ready, Set, Go program. The first component, Get Ready, is asking folks to be prepared before a wildfire threatens our community. We can all do this by creating defensible space and hardening our homes, which can protect them from radiant heat and embers that can fly long distances. Also, make sure you know how to release your automatic garage door and practice opening it manually with all drivers in your family. The second stage is Get Set, which is asking us to be prepared for the possibility of evacuation. We can do this by creating a wildfire action plan, which would be similar to an earthquake plan. putting together an emergency supply kit or go bag with essential items, including prescriptions, having a family communications plan to reconnect with your family members following an evacuation, and by backing your car and trailers into the driveway for a quick exit. The last stage is to go. If you have time, prepare the inside of your house by shutting all windows and doors. Remove flammable window coverings, turn off gas at the meter, then off your pilot lights, leave your lights on, and turn off your air conditioning. You can prepare the outside of your home by gathering flammable items from around your house and bringing them inside, connecting garden hoses, turning off your sprinklers, leaving exterior lights on, and making sure your emergency kit is in your vehicle. Lastly, dress appropriately. Long pants, long sleeve shirt, heavy shoes or boots, and make sure to have eye protection. That was a quick overview, but for more information, you can go to CAL FIRE's readyforwildfire.org website or your local fire agency. Next slide, please. Our thoughts are with the individuals and families who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The safety and well-being of our workers, customers, and the public remains our top priority, and we continue to take actions to maintain our operations and provide safe and reliable electric service. You may have seen our crews and trucks in your neighborhood. We continue to perform critical work to make urgent repairs and to protect communities from the threat of wildfires. Safely providing reliable service also means critical scheduled outages must continue. We do not take the decision to proceed with an outage lightly, and our teams are working to shorten the duration as much as possible. We are postponing non-critical work that would cause a customer outage and evaluating each outage on a case-by-case basis. When you see our crews working in the field, please know that while we are happy to answer questions about the work we are doing, we ask that the community continue to observe the physical distancing guidelines of staying at least 6 feet away and wearing a face covering when out in public to help protect you and our crews. We have relaxed program requirements to ensure customers continue to receive or have ease of enrolling in medical baseline and care. We have also suspended service disconnections for non-payment and are waiving late fees for residential and business customers impacted by the COVID-19 emergency. We live and work in the communities we serve, and we care about those communities deeply. To help Californians during this time, Edison International has donated $1.2 million to local nonprofits whose focus is on providing critical services, food and necessities to vulnerable communities in response to COVID-19. This also includes fundraising from our employees and a company match that brought in over $400,000. We know things will continue to change. We will continue to be here for you and keep you updated as we work through this crisis together. At this time, I would like to hand it over to Eric to discuss our wildfire mitigation efforts.
Thank you, Rondi, and really thank you everybody for your participation and engagement this evening. I want to start off the discussion this evening on my section here to talk about the worsening situation with wildfires in California. We're responding to the greatest societal challenge of our time: climate change and its impacts, including wildfires. Changes to California's climate means that the traditional notion of a fire season no longer exists the way we knew it. Hazardous fuel is building up. Nearly 147 million trees have been killed or weakened by drought and bark beetle infestation, while springtime rains have resulted in overgrowth and brush that will dry out over the summer. One of the other things or statistics that I want to, or sobering statistics, is that 10 out of the state's 20 most destructive wildfires have happened since 2015. And about a quarter of our service area is in high fire risk areas. The greenhouse gas reduction to address climate change is critical. Executing on our long-term vision cannot happen without adapting our business and helping our communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. And we're doubling down on our efforts to prevent and respond to wildfires. Next slide, please. So as in past years, when there is a high risk for wildfire, we may declare a public safety power shutoff, or PSPS, and temporarily shut off power to your neighborhood to prevent our electric system from becoming the source of an ignition. We recognize and appreciate the impact of PSPS that they have on our customers, and we do not take lightly the decision to proactively de-energize portions of our grid. SE recognizes that PSPS is a disruptive hardship, but it is necessary to protect Californians from catastrophic wildfires. Patrols conducted after PSPS events have found multiple instances of equipment damage and tree branches contacting power lines that could have ignited a fire. And while we are taking every effort to reduce the number and length of PSPS, we will continue to use these outages as required to protect public safety. The PSPS events that have transpired last year in many ways reinforced the work we're doing to harden the grid and also revealed lessons that have helped us refine our processes. First of all, wildfire mitigation tools. Last year, we met or exceeded nearly all of the goals that we have set forth for ourselves in our wildfire mitigation plan. And this year, we're right on track when it comes to the deployment of grid hardening technology that I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, such as cover conductor and sectionalizing devices, and a combination of the two that will reduce the frequency of PSPS over time under normally expected and high fire threat conditions. Customer care programs and communications. We recognize the difficulty a PSPS event can create, and we are committed to supporting and assisting our customers and communities. We will touch on this in a lot more detail, but at a high level, we're continuing proactive outreach to communities prior to peak wildfire season to help with preparedness. We're also improving our communications to customers to make information more readily available and easy to access. And stakeholder engagement. We're also increasing our collaboration with stakeholders and our other partners, such as community-based organizations, to better assist vulnerable customers. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're also exploring and implementing changes to our PSPS approach. We're adjusting plans to safely provide in-person services where practicable with proper precautions. Enhancing virtual services to customers, such as web, page, and apps, providing info, directing customers to resources. Accelerating coordination with county and state emergency management officials to help ensure preparedness and contingency planning are in place for critical infrastructure providers. And prioritizing identification of healthcare facilities and other critical infrastructure providers supporting COVID-19 response, including additional temporary medical facilities. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about our wildfire mitigation efforts. Next slide. So let's start with a little bit of science, or fire science. The triangle you see in the middle illustrates the three elements needed for an ignition. As depicted in the fire triangle, hazardous weather and fuel conditions coexist throughout the SE service territory every fire season. And SE's mitigation strategy is to assess the conditions for weather and fuel to determine when the risk is high, but to eliminate the heat component by preventing power line ignitions resulting during those times. And this can be done through a variety of ways, much of which is highlighted in SE's wildfire mitigation plan. Next slide, please. So our number one priority remains the safety of the public, our customers, employees, and first responders. And a wildfire mitigation plan is designed to further that commitment. Our plan focuses on hardening our infrastructure, bolstering situational awareness, and enhancing operational practices to keep our communities safe. We have made substantial progress in 2019 and will continue to build on that this year. And in 2020, SE proposes to deploy more than 850 weather stations by the end of 2020. We have about 720 installed to date. And to better forecast potential wildfire conditions using 161 wildfire cameras that we have installed throughout the territory to cover high fire risk areas to be more effective in responding to fire events when they occur. We're replacing more than 700 miles of power lines with insulated wire in 2020 and fast-acting fuses at more than 3,000 locations to help reduce wildfire risk. And continuing to conduct enhanced inspections of our infrastructure in high fire risk areas. So we're deploying and testing new technologies, including leveraging machine learning, artificial intelligence, and advanced risk modeling to make informed decisions of where to target our work. We also have an emergency response team that is readily available and is FEMA trained, which is the Federal Energy and Management Agency. For those of you who FEMA as well as ICS, we use the Incident Command System to ensure that we can work seamlessly through federal, state, and local emergency management organizations. Next slide, please. And now we inspect about 1.1 million trees across their service territory every year to determine if they could pose a hazard by making contact with their power lines. About 500,000 trees are in high fire risk areas identified by the California Public Utilities Commission. In these high fire risk areas, the work includes creating a minimum of a 12-foot clearance at the time of trim between trees and our power lines to prevent vegetation from coming into contact with electrical equipment and potentially sparking a blaze. And in addition, tall trees up to 200 feet from the wires will be assessed and may be removed if they demonstrate a high risk of falling into lines or vegetation like palm fronds that winds could carry into power equipment. Managing tree growth and other vegetation will help make communities safer, but in some cases they could dramatically change how the trees look, creating concerns among residents. We'll continue to remove dead, dying, diseased trees in high risk areas. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the work specifically in your community. So the importance of weather forecasting and modeling. SCE has a staff of meteorologists and weather forecasting models that will use this information to provide the most precise forecasting possible, which will help us identify areas of wildfire risk. The size of SCE's service territory and high fire risk areas and its diverse team require a dense network of weather stations to monitor specific location, real-time conditions, and SCE plans the deployment of these stations in 2020 in part due to realizing that even greater benefits than had been expected. For example, the data that they provide is allowing for more targeted de-energizations during PSPS events. We plan to have up to 2,600 weather stations by 2024. And by the end of this year, the company will have one of the country's largest, densest networks of weather stations. SCE has installed 28 weather stations and plans to install 4 more by the end of the year in this area. The local weather information is very important to SCE, and we evaluate the need for PSPS rather than relying on publicly available weather data, which covers a large area. The weather stations which SCE has installed give us the ability to monitor the weather data at very local levels. And in this area, we have multiple weather stations which will help provide the information we need to reduce the number of customers impacted by PSPS. Next slide, please. And one of the key hardening technologies for the grid is covered conductor versus the use of their uninsulated conductor being used by the industry today. We have installed 37 miles of covered conductor or insulated wires in the area with plans to reach 21 miles by the end of 2021. Many of the ignitions associated with utility infrastructure are caused by objects that contact power lines or by conductor-to-conductor contact. Installing covered conductor reduces the risks and has proven to be an effective prevention measure in the industry. SCE is targeting the highest risk areas for near-term deployment, as well as areas where covered conductor can reduce the need for PSPS over the longer term. Next slide, please. And in the short term, we have focused on improving our operating flexibility and ability to sectionalize our circuits to reduce the impact of PSPS. This is one of our most significant enhancements in 2020. So let me take a moment to explain the picture you see on the right and describe this in a little bit more detail. So this is the diagram of one of the circuits in the area that we've received a number of questions about based on last year's experience, the Esteban. The red areas, I'm going to go through a little bit about what you see in the top and the bottom. So the red areas up at the top reflect what is designated on the CPUC high fire threat maps as Tier 3. And the orange areas below, or salmon color below, are considered Tier 2, with Tier 3 being a more extreme risk. The lines you see in black are how the distribution circuit covers the area to serve each customer throughout this local area served by the Esteban. And each of the shaded colors, purple, yellow, green, and aqua, Those colors represent how we divided the circuit into sections for analysis and potential scope for de-energization, performing these in sections versus the entire circuit. Over the past few years, SCE has accelerated the installation of switching devices that are remote controlled on circuits to be able to isolate these areas within each circuit. During non-PSPS conditions, these switches allow SCE to selectively de-energize one or more of these areas based on real-time conditions, or sometimes reroute power from other circuits to the non-affected areas and minimize customer outage time. During a PSPS, we'll use these switches to minimize the number of customers de-energized overall. For example, if the green section up at the top in the diagram was meeting the conditions where we were de-energize a section and would be subject to PSPS, we would be able to de-energize that section while keeping the remaining areas energized. And we would be reviewing each area separately depending on weather conditions, what we're seeing from our weather stations, and how we're being informed by information that is occurring on the ground. If we're able to sectionalize our circuits more effectively, this reduces both the impact of PSPS as well as facilitates faster restoration because there's less patrolling and inspection involved. The more we're able to sectionalize our circuits, I think ultimately the number of customers in every circuit will be reduced. One thing I do want to stress though is that this all depends on the wind conditions during high and dry fuel, low humidity conditions at the time that we're in an event. And lastly, we're in the process of scoping more cover conductor on the Esteban, most of which is planned for installation through 2022 that'll have the benefits that I described earlier. Next slide, please. So as we've discussed, SE is working to harden our grid to reduce the chances of starting a fire. An additional benefit is a reduction of customers energized during a PSPS event. SE analyzed the grid hardening activities we completed and estimate that if weather conditions were the same as last year, we would expect somewhere in the neighborhood of a 25 to 40% reduction in the number of customers de-energized based on the steps that I described earlier. And that number will continue to improve as we make additional improvements over the next few years. I realize that de-energization is a disruption, which is why we're offering several customer care programs, some of which are specifically designed around particular areas. And Mike will be discussing those programs in a little bit. Now, we'll be talking a little bit more specifically about PSPS. Next slide. So in past years, when there is a high fire risk for a wildfire, we may declare a public safety power shutoff and temporarily shut off power to your neighborhood to prevent our electric system from becoming the source of ignition. The California Public Utility Commission gives us the authority to protect public safety, and PSPS will be used to complement infrastructure hardening measures that I discussed when weather conditions threaten power lines in a way that present an imminent danger to public safety. And these are used when we look at weather and fuel together during what we call elevated or severe high fire conditions. And it primarily impacts circuits in high fire risk areas, and in rare instances, other circuits in non-high fire risk areas that may be impacted if transmission lines are energized or portions of circuits are fed by traverse high fire areas that feed certain sections. As more mitigations are deployed, the company expects to reduce the scope and impact of PSPS, but PSPS will have to remain an available tool to mitigate wildfire risk during severe weather and high fire potential index events. Next slide, please. So our decision to shut off power is dynamic and is made by considering many factors which are impacted by prevailing and our anticipated weather conditions. Here are some factors that we consider in deciding when to shut off power for public safety reasons. So when it comes to weather, there's a few things that we consider here. And that is if the National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning, for example. Assessments from our in-house meteorologists using high-resolution weather models, data from SE weather stations and publicly available weather stations. We develop what's called a fire potential index, and it's a tool that allows us to utilize weather forecasts and fuel conditions to assess the overall potential for wildfire risk. And wind speeds. Wind speeds are particularly important, and it's closely monitored when they are expected or when they exceed or expected to exceed things like the National Weather Service wind advisory level, or things that represent unusual conditions for the local area, such as what you might expect to see during the highest periods about 1% of the time. Wind speeds are particularly important when we consider them in combination with other local conditions, such as dry vegetation, that could present a true hazard for the community. Wind speed thresholds may also be adjusted based on other factors or circuit design. Public authorities we take a lot of value in early engagement and receiving specific concerns received from state and local fire authorities, emergency management personnel, and law enforcement regarding public safety issues. The expected impact of turning off power to essential services such as public service safety agencies, water pumps, and traffic controls is also considered. And the operational considerations, such as the state of our potentially impacted circuits, flying debris, or down wires, and when possible and safe, we can deploy on-the-ground observers in high fire risk areas to monitor live conditions in real time. Next slide, please. So SE remains committed to providing timely notifications to potentially impacted customers, local governments, public safety agencies, and the California State Warning Center before, during, and after a de-energization event. SE will continue to work with local governments and public safety agencies, as well as essential service providers and business customers to refine the program. SE aims to provide priority notification to first responders, public safety partners, and local governments 72 hours before a potential PSPS. Additional updates are made again at 24-hour intervals. SE begins initial notification to remaining customers up to 48 hours in advance of a potential PSPS event. Notifications are then made to these customers in 24-hour intervals to provide updates. SE will make every attempt to notify customers at the 1 to 4 hour warning stage. But given the unpredictability of shifting weather during PSPS events, implementation of this timeframe may vary. SCE will attempt to notify customers before de-energization whenever it's possible. And though SCE will continue to make every effort to reduce the duration of PSPS events, re-energization is feasible after several conditions, such as a post-event patrol is conducted after adverse weather conditions abate. Verifications are completed by our field personnel that electrical equipment can be energized safely, and identified damages to equipment and structures have been remediated. Now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Mike Morelli to discuss customer care and engagement.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I really appreciate you spending the time and learning how to what Edison is doing for PSPS and how to better prepare and participate in our programs and services. At SCE, our goal is to keep our communities and customers informed and to help them be better prepared for emergencies and directing them to resources where they can receive aid. Next slide, please. We've made quite improvements from last year, and Eric talked about some of them, but I do want to talk about our website. We have a dedicated PSPS page on sce.com as a one-stop shop for information before and during events, including fire weather and PSPS information. We've made significant investments to handle increased visitor traffic during PSPS or other events. There will be a simplified map allowing visitors to view PSPS alerts and notifications, as well as identifying the location of community crew vehicles and community resource centers. And I'll describe those a little bit more detailed in just a bit. There's also an address search functionality, which identifies if a location is under consideration, de-energization, or not impacted by PSPS. We are continuing to provide PSPS notifications via email, text, voice call, and TTY formats. We are enhancing our emergency outage notification system to allow customers to select to hear and read PSPS notifications in their preferred language. In addition to English, languages include Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Korean. We have implemented zip code level alerts to provide notifications to people beyond SCE account holders. So if you happen to be served by a master meter account or not directly by Edison, you can still sign up for alerts and be informed when there's PSPS events. And again, those are by email, text, and voice by providing your contact information and the desired zip code. We are also adding or have added Nextdoor as a communications tool to communicate with account holders and non-account holder customers within its service area about PSPS notifications and alerts. So Nextdoor is a third-party social media site, and if you're signed up for that, we will be using that as a means for communication. It's important to remember to sign up or verify that you're signed up to receive any and all of these alerts. And that is a key point we want to get across this evening is to communicate with you, we need to know we have current information. So we'd appreciate you verifying that. And we'll provide some resources at the end here, bringing it all together. As far as our customer care programs in your community, we have, during extended outages, we have 8 community crew vehicles that are available to deploy, as well as community resource centers at certain locations that are available in affected areas. Services are similar at either, but community resource centers are brick and mortar locations that SCE has contracted with to serve SCE customers during extended outages, and community crew vehicles are mobile and they're deployed to different locations as needed. Customers can charge their personal mobile device, continue to receive updates about the outage. Snacks and water are also provided. We'll also have agents that are available to help customers update their account and get assistance with questions. SC would also plan to activate community crew vehicles and community resource centers to support customers during a public safety power shutoff in affected areas during COVID-19. However, those services will be provided in observance of social distancing practices, which may include a drive-through and a no-contact cell phone charging capability as space permits. We plan to have prepackaged customer resiliency kits for customer pickup, which may include PSPS information, small resiliency devices, personal protection equipment for customer use, and light snacks and water. We have a community resource center at the Santa Paula Community Center, and we're also working to identify additional locations in the area. Employees staffing the CRCs and community crew vehicles are rostered positions, meaning a set of company employees that have gone through extensive training to provide a better customer experience than maybe previously we've done. It's an area we've beefed up this year. At SC, we're also committed to promoting clean energy solutions that expand the growth of distributed generation in disadvantaged communities and increase customer resiliency in high fire-prone areas. To support that goal, the Self-Generation Incentive Program has been modernized with generous incentives for resiliency related to wildfires and low-income customers. We have battery incentives for customers who are income qualified or located in a disadvantaged community, and they've been raised to 85 cents a watt hour. The incentives are even higher, $1 a watt hour, if these customers are also located in Tier 2 or 3 fire zone or have experienced at least 2 PSPS events. If you're interested in learning more about the program eligibility and how to apply, the California Public Utilities Commission, along with SCE and the other utilities, are hosting a webinar tomorrow, and more information about the webinar will be posted at selfgenca.com. That's SELFGENCA. We're also offering a $50 rebate for small appliance and device battery backup. All SCE customers are eligible for the $50 rebate on qualified battery-powered backup. It's designed to enable customers flexibility with respect to sizing of battery backup options from smaller handheld backup batteries to provide power to smaller devices such as cell phones and laptops. It can also be applied to larger but still portable options that can power home appliances such as a refrigerator. The program supports personal investment in home resiliency and is available through SCE's online marketplace portal. And again, the link will be provided later. We will also provide all this information in a couple of slides. A new program that we're on the verge of launching is a generator rebate for well water dependent customers. So we've identified a small segment of customers in high risk fire areas that are dependent on well water for general home use. When customers lose the power, they lose the ability to pump water, impacting all water use in the home. For this segment of customers, SCE will launch June 10th a rebate program, again through our online marketplace portal, with a $300 rebate towards a qualifying backup generator to provide power to a well pump. We'll also increase that amount to $500 for income qualified customers. Customers must attest to being well water dependent. They must reside in a high risk fire area. And for the enhanced incentive, they must be enrolled in our California Alternative Rates for Energy program, our CARE program. Customers living in well water communities will receive information about the program in the coming weeks. The other program I want to bring to your attention is a fully subsidized program for income qualified critical care customers. So customers who are on our medical baseline and identified as critical care for life support by their physicians, who are enrolled in our CARE program, our California Alternative Rates for Energy program, and reside in high-risk fire areas, will be eligible for this new program. We'll be launching it in June here as well, and we'll provide a full subsidy for a portable battery backup solution to aid in the resiliency during de-energization events or other emergencies. So if you're enrolled in these programs, you will receive information about the program when we begin to launch. Next slide, please. Last year, we launched and continued a robust community effort to help customers prepare for wildfire-related issues, including PSPS. SCE conducted over 550 meetings and presentations with local governments, public safety partners, tribal officials, community-based organizations, and the general public. We received helpful feedback from our partners and customers and continue to identify opportunities for improvement. A lot of the programs I just talked about came from feedback that we received through these engagement opportunities. And we plan to continue to engage our customers and stakeholders and partners in advance of the wildfire season. Hosting these community meetings like this one is an example of that. We're also meeting with local and tribal governments, public safety partners, and essential service providers are hospital, healthcare providers, water, wastewater, telecom providers, and we're working with them to help prepare for PSPS. We have an advertising campaign that maybe you've heard on both radio and digital, in market educating customers on PSPS. And we have ongoing multi-channel communications about SCE's wildfire mitigation activities. We also have letters communicating potential power shutoffs planned for all customers in our service territory a little bit later. Next slide. One of the most important aspects of our program is to engage our most vulnerable customers and partner with our community-based organizations and community stakeholders to support their resiliency. Working with existing philanthropic partners and deploying customer programs for PSPS preparedness, all hazard awareness, and emergency planning. SCE has actively taken steps to identify medical baseline and critical care or life support customers to ensure we have the most up-to-date contact information and that they are enrolled to receive outage notifications. We took extra precaution with critical care customers. When the company cannot confirm that alerts and notifications have been received, we send a representative to their home to notify them in person and make sure they have an emergency plan. For our most vulnerable customers, we continue to engage with statewide and local community-based organizations and community stakeholders. We have leveraged existing philanthropic partners and customer programs to focus on PSPS preparedness, all hazard awareness, and emergency planning. We have a web page, sc.com/wildfire, that has all the information and resources related to wildfire and PSPS. We also have an email, wildfireoutreach@sc.com, if you have additional questions. Once again, that's wildfireoutreach@sc.com. Here's what you can help us or be prepared. Feedback. We want to hear from you. Like I said, a lot of our programs and actions have been shaped by our community feedback. You will be receiving a survey from us to provide feedback on our presentation this evening. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions or concerns and ask us your follow-up. I know we have a list of questions that have been coming in. We're going to get to those in just a second. Your feedback will help us improve our customer communication and engagement to ensure that the information we're providing helps you and helps our communities be informed and prepared for wildfires. One note I want to make on this is it is really helpful if the feedback is as actionable as possible so that we understand the specific issue or problem that needs to be solved, and or we have contact information. So if you send us an email, then obviously if we have questions, we can follow up with you on that. We'll also have the presentation and the recording of the meeting posted on our website. So if you have a friend or a neighbor that wasn't able to attend this evening, please have them go to the website and watch. Or if there's something that you didn't quite capture during the presentation, need to rewatch it, will be posted and available. I really want to encourage you to sign up for outage alerts, including PSPS. It's really important to receive the information from us that we have your latest information. And again, you can get those alerts via text, email, or voicemail. And you can also sign up for Nextdoor community alerts if you're not already on that platform. If you depend on electrically powered medical equipment, plan to have a backup power source. You may be eligible for our medical baseline program, And again, you can find out more information and how to apply on our webpage. I also mentioned some of the customer programs and rebates, and you can find links on the webpage as well for those programs. Be prepared, as an emergency can happen at any time. You can help your family be prepared with the safety preparedness plan, some basic supplies and advanced planning. Whether it's a pandemic, an earthquake, or a wildfire, preparedness will help everyone cope better and stay safe. We also have power outage tips at the website as well. So that concludes the formal remarks, and with that, I will turn it back over to Rhonda to start the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric and Mike, for all of that information. We will now be opening up for Q&A, and I would like to encourage you, if you haven't already, to submit any questions that you have on our wildfire mitigation efforts and our PSPS protocols. We have some questions that have come through and some that came when you registered for the event tonight. So we will be efficient in our responses and try to get to as many questions as we can in the time allotted. As Mike mentioned, if you are unable to get your question answered tonight or have a question that comes up to you after tonight's program, please submit them at wildfireoutreach@scE.com. And we will get started on some of the questions that have come in. I think directed to you, Eric, there's been a few questions on undergrounding as a wildfire mitigation solution, kind of the costs that might be associated with that and why we might not see more undergrounding. And also in a similar vein, another wildfire resiliency measure, microgrids, what we might be doing in that space.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you for the question. I'll kind of address them both together. Undergrounding and microgrids, they both have benefits. And for undergrounding, the benefit is, it's probably intuitive to many people that the infrastructure isn't exposed to the elements as you would with an overhead system. The challenge with underground systems, though, is that the infrastructure is it's significant when we put it underground. And so it creates some challenges for the feasibility. If we look at places that have different elevations, different challenges with routing, the cost becomes an issue as well as the feasibility. And so we are evaluating areas where undergrounding might make sense. But this is one of the other reasons why we focused on the cover conductor, because a cover conductor has many similar benefits in terms of protecting against contact from different objects and vegetation. Frankly, it could be deployed much faster, and it's proven to be more cost effective. And so by and large, we'll be installing more cover conductor, but we will have areas that we'll also be assessing for underground where it makes sense. Microgrids have a similar challenge. And when we think about microgrids, the sort of the definition of that is a portion or say you have an underground portion that is fed by an overhead section that traverses an area that is exposed to high fire conditions. The ideal situation is de-energizing the overhead section, but maintaining that underground section and not de-energizing it. But in order to do that, there has to be enough generation to support that as an island. And this is where the cost of feasibility, very similar to underground, it becomes a challenge. Because in many cases that we simply can't put enough diesel generators to support that. And we are working on technologies that would be more suitable for microgrids. And I do expect the future to have more of them, but right now, those are some of the challenges that we're facing.
Great, thanks, Eric. Mike, I think this one would be directed to you. We have a lot of agricultural customers in the Santa Clara Valley, the audience that we have tonight, and there's some questions related on the impacts to agriculture and water availability when we have to do a PSPS. I know we've outreached extensively to a lot of the agricultural community, not only in this area, but throughout our service territory, and have had workshops with water agencies, but maybe you can elaborate on those efforts a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. So we do a lot of collaboration with our critical infrastructure partners that I mentioned in my prepared remarks. That does include water agencies and wastewater agencies as well. And so we talk them through in a similar fashion around the process and the technical aspects of PSPS. But we also talk about what they can do to prepare for resiliency solutions in that regard. A number of the agencies have moved forward with different types of mitigation of their own. And again, we work with them. I also want to point out that when we're in the middle of an event or an emergency, we work very closely with our public safety partners. And there will be at times requests to take certain actions to energize, de-energize, potentially provide portable generation if need to for a public safety purpose. And so we work very collaboratively with them to meet the needs of the community in the middle of the emergency. We'd prefer to have all that planning and activity done before we get into an emergency situation. But if we have assets or can take actions to mitigate public safety, we will do that during the incident. I think Eric touched on that we follow FEMA instant command structure. And it's a very flexible structure, and we have over 500 people trained and available in our company to resource during any type of incident or event. And we stand up teams for PSPS events. We would stand up teams for storms or other natural disasters as well. So those are a number of different activities we take on in the company to help mitigate the impact of natural disasters in our communities.
Great, thanks, Mike. And one more back at you on our notification testing capabilities. How do we make sure we're testing our notification capabilities properly?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. So as I mentioned, we have these emergency teams. So we will routinely do drills internally. We do drills as sub teams. We also do drills with outside agencies. So we'll bring in, again, our public safety partners and work with them to test the whole process, if you will. We also, we're right in the midst, and one of the outcomes, quite frankly, of these workshops we've done with our critical infrastructure customers was a desire by our telecom customers to say, hey, we want to drill with you. So we're right in the midst of setting up that kind of drill and practice to make sure that when we get into a situation, everybody knows what to expect and how it will work. On outage notifications in particular, we do test those typically behind the scenes. I do know we did have an incident where unfortunately we sent a test notification to about a dozen customers in the local area here. So I apologize for that. The good part is we tested and we found out we had some gaps. We weren't supposed to send the message out. So I apologize for that errant message. But that is part of our preparation for PSPS processes and other emergencies.
Great. Eric, I think this one's directed to you. And you addressed a lot of this, but maybe be a little more specific. Has the wind/weather criteria for triggering PSPS events been revised this season to reduce the number of shutoffs?
Yeah, great question. And I see it's the top one here. So the criteria that we use is really based on understanding what's unusual for the area, and mitigating the potential for objects to blow into our lines. So one of the things that we've done is to improve both the accuracy of our weather forecasting as well as putting more sensors out there on the system or weather stations to be able to get a better sense of what's actually happening. So we've made some marketed improvements in those areas. And as we begin to harden the grid, we'll start to see those factors begin to be adjusted upwards. I mentioned cover conductor as being one of the technologies that will allow us to do it. It'll take us a little bit to install enough cover conductor to be able to do that, which is why in the meantime, we're focused on as many of these operational and smaller upgrades that we could do to get a pretty significant benefit in reducing the number of folks that potentially could be at risk for PSPS. I want to tie this a little bit to another question that I saw, and maybe if I can attack those at the same time, because I think they're related. There's a question here related to the use of, and I'll just read it, does SE monitor all available reliable weather data in the area in addition to just your own stations? There is a network of RAWS stations that are well maintained and reliable too. So thank you for the question. And we have used RAWS stations, and particularly in places where we did not have a sufficient number of SE weather stations that have been deployed. So when we started the journey, we put in as many as we could in the areas that were most representative on our feeders. But there were some places where we needed to rely on publicly available data to supplement where we didn't have sufficient coverage. So raw stations were a source of that. One of the things that we learned, though, is that the raw stations, they may have a different update frequency as SE weather stations. So because of the dynamic situation in terms of weather, we refresh the information in terms of sustained and gust speeds every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes we get a fresh reading. So we were able to trend and track the progress of our weather stations. And if we have multiple ones on a circuit, that allows us to evaluate each of these individual sections individually. So we have deployed more of our SE weather stations, but we will use these raw stations to supplement that as well.
Great. So Eric, you've talked a lot about sectionalizing circuits, and I think there's still a few more questions about what we have done to sectionalize circuits in this area. We've had some specific areas brought up, such as areas within the Esteban circuit, Sterling Hills, and then we had a question regarding the Thomas Aquinas College area, kind of experiencing a significant number of outages. So maybe you can package the work we're doing to answer those questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have reviewed each one of the circuits in this area for the greatest ability to sectionalize. In some cases, it required us to install additional switches or make some other modifications. So, and for every circuit in a high fire risk area, we have essentially think of it as an operational playbook. It's almost like a pre-engineered design for how we could potentially sectionalize in different combinations. I will say, though, that there are going to be times when weather events are extreme and all of the weather stations are, causing us to have to take action. In those cases, sectionalization may not be as effective, but what we've seen in our experience from last year is that we were able to make a pretty substantial improvement through sectionalization, which is why we leaned into that even further this year to get a short-term impact and to be able to provide some consistency in how we respond to these events.
Great. And then Mike, I think I'll combine a few and direct them your way, kind of relating to our pocketbooks as ratepayers and customers. So how does the increased occurrence of PSPS affect our rates and charges? Is there lost income, which then needs to be made up? And then related to that, there's some questions on food loss and things related to PSPS outages, and if customers are able to get reimbursed for some of those costs.
All right, I'll take kind of the general question on rates and impacts. So, the short answer is, we're investing a lot in the grid to make these improvements, and that does flow through to rates. So whether it's, and we have a couple of different mechanisms for recovering cost in California. The most significant proceeding is our general rate case, which operates every 3 years. So we have a request in front of the commission, and generally the cost related to wildfire mitigation is going to equate to probably something a little less than $5 a month for the average customer. So yes, I can't dodge that and say there's not a cost impact here. There is a cost impact for all this work. I think it's important to understand there's also a cost impact of not doing the work as well. It just may come in a different form and at different periods of time. So we are investing heavily in the grid. As far as claims for food loss and that, first I'll emphasize that at our community resource centers and our community crew vehicles, we should have either ICE available and or ICE vouchers available to help with any of that, mitigate any of that food spoilage. We do have a claims process that is on our website if you feel that a claim is warranted. We do have some general guidelines for a natural disaster or a natural event. Generally, a claim would not be paid for food spoilage, although there are conditions. For instance, if you signed up for this last year, we had a policy where if you signed up for alerts and were not notified and were out of power for a period of time, then we did pay for some food spoilage. But generally, our position would be no. But we're trying to provide some services at our CRCs and community crew vehicles to help mitigate that.
Mike, the next question, and you talked extensively about it, so I'm not sure if you have anything to add, but just want to acknowledge it, is there financial assistance or rebates for purchasing a generator, especially for disabled customers? Do you have anything to add or on that?
No, I would just go to the website and just again recognize that the income qualified critical care battery backup program is not out yet, and neither is the well water rebate program. So those are not going to be on the website just yet, but they will be in the next 15 days or so. But what you will find on the website is the $50 rebate program that is available and open right now, with those other two coming soon.
And the next question, have any considerations been evaluated, studies, and possible solutions in case of loss of power to many of us that are having to work virtually from home during these COVID times? I don't know, Mike, if kind of programs in place and the decisions we're making.
Well, on the decisions, and I think Eric spent a fair amount of time. We truly do look to figure out how we can mitigate the impact of PSPS on any customer. So we spent a lot of time in the off season, if you will, here doing these activities that Eric described, both procedurally as well as deploying actual grid hardening and mitigation of sectionalizing and activities like that. So we, all things being equal, we would expect PSPS customers impacted by PSPS events to be materially less this year. So that's first and foremost. At the end of the day, the PSPS decisions are made based on real-time weather and conditions that are out there. And again, as Eric teed up, we don't take these decisions lightly, but we are doing this to prevent our equipment from being the source of ignition for a wildfire that could be devastating for a community. So we are going to take those actions. We are trying to mitigate that with customer care activities by making the community resource centers and the community crew vehicles available. But if we have to de-energize power, we're gonna de-energize the power to prevent that potential source of ignition.
Eric, there's a couple questions relating to preventing fires when we re-energize lines after a PSPS event. If you could address what we're doing in that regard.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there's a couple of times when you'll see our crews out there doing inspection and patrol. The first time you'll see that is even prior to an event, and we call that a pre-patrol. And what we're looking for in those cases is any situations that may have changed that could be an issue that needs to be remediated even before the wind event gets there. But if we assume for a moment that we're in a PSPS and we've de-energized one of our circuits, then we then go through a process of re-energization or restoration. And there's a couple of steps associated with that process. The first thing is we do have to wait for the weather conditions that cause the PSPS event to have abated sufficiently for us to begin to safely patrol and inspect our system. So we monitor the wind speeds, we look for when the forecast of the weather event is subsiding, and we get validation from the weather stations that we're tracking that indeed it's safe to patrol. When we do patrol, we on the ground take our observers, and sometimes by air, and look for any and all potential situations, including damaged facilities, tree branches that are in our conductors, any kind of interference, to ensure that when we do re-energize, that our crews can declare an all safe. So a couple things there. One is it will take some time for us to do the re-energization. It's based on the wind event itself beginning to diminish, as well as the time it takes for our crews to patrol the line as far as it needs to go. And again, where we do have really long lines, we also dispatch aerial resources to support that.
And Eric, back to you. Is there an updated public circuit map that shows the sectionalization? Areas in South Fillmore, north of the Santa Clara River, and south of Highway 126 would be shut off with the Bardsdale circuit. Has work been done to separate the city of Fillmore areas from the unincorporated Bardsdale areas south of the Santa Clara River?
Yeah. On this call, I can't speak to real specifics. I know if it's if it comes from a public official, certainly I think we could provide that information. What you'll see on our website is circuits that are in scope for de-energization and circuits that have been de-energized. It may or may not show the smallest footprint possible when we do some of this sectionalization. So we're still working on trying to improve that capability. And the situation is a little bit dynamic because this is kind of more of a kind of a utility operations and engineering type of situation. But our distribution circuits, they change often in terms of configuration. And the reason for that is we're constantly performing maintenance. When there are outages, we reconfigure the system. So we have to constantly update these plans or these diagrams to be able to keep up with how we would respond during a PSPS event.
Great. And then one of the next questions or comments, if we have any of our Santa Paula city government partners on the line, I just at least want to read it out loud. I don't know that our Edison personnel will have an answer, but I want to acknowledge it. Are water generating utilities prepared to pump enough water in the event of a prolonged shutoff? And how long can Santa Paula continue to pump with their backup generators? You know, I think I would just add, you know, we are working in partnership with our government agencies in identifying critical services and essential facilities. And so we can identify these types of situations and needs when we do have an outage. I don't know if Eric or Mike, you have anything to add, but I wanted to get that comment out there.
No, I don't have specific information on that water operator.
Okay, and Eric, I think you just addressed this on how we're constantly updating our circuit maps, but this says following another customer question, have you updated old circuit maps? The map from our area was originated in 1935.
Yeah, so we do have a process for updating our maps because we are pretty routinely performing operations on our system, replacing aging infrastructure and those kinds of modifications. And each time we do, we have to update the equipment and really the configuration of our circuits because they could be subject to change.
So I think that is all the questions I see. I know Anita had asked about how to sign up for PSPS alerts, but we've answered that and it's on your screen. So those are all the questions that I'm seeing that came in this evening for us to address right away. So again, thank you to Eric and Mike. I want to thank everyone for your participation this evening. You will be receiving a survey to provide us feedback. As mentioned before, this meeting has been recorded. You can view the recording and get more information about our wildfire mitigation work and PSPS at sce.com/wildfire. This link also has the full calendar of future online community meetings that we will be hosting in the coming month. Please share this information with your neighbors, friends, and families. Again, the SCE contact slide is back on your screen. Please email any unanswered questions to wildfireoutreach@sce.com. Thank you all again, and we wish you and your family good health. Have a wonderful evening.